Welcome to the Wealth Horizon podcast, where we explore the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities shaping the financial industry today. In each episode, we bring you insightful conversations with industry leaders, sharing practical, actionable strategies to help advisors deepen relationships and meet growth goals. I hope you enjoy. Hi, everyone. I'm Rosemary Denney, and welcome to the Wealth Horizon podcast. I'm so excited to have Brian Hughes as our guest. Brian serves as the president of Eton Advisors, which is a Chapel Hill-based multifamily office serving the ultra-high net worth market. He leads the firm's strategic initiatives, growth, and thought leadership. But before his current role at Eton, Brian worked for more than 30 years in the wealth management and family office space. And he was the founder of Hughes Growth Strategies and is known in our industry as the secret weapon for organic and inorganic growth, as well as consulting on operational and service model challenges for some of the largest and best wealth management firms in the business. Prior to launching Hughes Growth, Brian was responsible for growth at Threshold Group, which is now part of Alti Tiedemann Global. And before that, served as managing director and head of business development at Pitcairn. I've seen his work firsthand, and it's impressive. But beyond all that, he is a close friend of mine. We were introduced by a mutual friend when I launched my firm. And actually, Brian, I think you had launched your firm too. So here we are.
Wow. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I don't know about secret weapon, but I'm flattered, and it's great to be with you. We go back a number of years. We've collaborated together. I've enjoyed our work together. I think you're brilliant at what you do. I think your firm is incredible, and I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too. It's been a long time in the making, so I'm excited.
Yep.
Well, I thought we could just kick things off by sort of maybe you provide an update of where you are now. You are in a very different role than you have been in a while, and I would just love to know how things are going and how things are at Eton.
Yeah, so I joined Eton officially back in February as president of the firm. And I can tell you a little bit about the journey only because, in some ways it kind of fell in my lap, although I think it was meant to be. So I've known the founders of Eton for 15 years. As a matter of fact, when I was at Threshold Group, I met Rob, Teresa, and Jack, the three founders of the firm after they left U.S. Trust and went to UBS. And then that kind of blew up only because of the mortgage-backed security crisis of 2008. And UBS kind of said, you're free to go. So they hired Sarah Hamilton from Fox, and Sarah interviewed all their clients, and they were really trying to decide, do they want to join another multifamily office like Threshold Group, or do they want to start their own firm? So unfortunately for us at Threshold, they decided to start their own firm, which I think at the end of the day, it's worked out for me that I get to join this great firm. So I've known the three founders, but frankly, when I sat down with them in early 2023, by happenstance, I happened to be in town, and Rob asked me to stop by and spent about an hour and a half with them, and I was truly amazed. And I'm not saying I don't get impressed very often. It's hard to impress me, but I've just known and worked with so many firms, nearly 75 in my career as a consultant, and as you mentioned, with Pitcairn and Threshold Group. I was really blown away. And I asked myself and I asked them, how come I never run into you? And the reason is they've just grown very steadily over those 15 years. But they really want to take the firm to the next level. And so through that conversation, we agreed that we would continue to talk. And in January, we sat down and we said, let's get serious. So I had been looking to lead and join a firm. I was not unhappy with my consulting practice, Rosemary, as you know. I had so much fun working with so many great firms in the industry in the family wealth space. But I just had this itch to go back and really not necessarily run a firm, but help lead a firm and take it to a great firm to the next level. So as I said, it just kind of landed in my lap, and I couldn't be more excited. I wake up every day just as energized as I've ever been in my career because, again, I feel so strongly about what we do, who we do it with, and how we do it. So that's kind of where I am.
That's great. And I think what you said is very interesting. You and I see a lot of firms. You've seen so many firms. You've seen the ins and outs of a lot of different kinds of firms. And I think it must have been very very special at Eton to attract you and to get you to leave Hughes Growth. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, definitely was something that I just felt, wow, I feel like this is where I need to be. And we can get into a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, I'd love to know what you saw at Eton specifically, that you felt compelled to be a part of the team, what you felt sort of set it apart from other advisory firms.
Yeah, so, very simply, I think there's two things. One is the service model and the service structure and the ability to leverage technology that they built and Eaton built itself. Maloney was really the creator out of necessity at Eaton because that was their goal when they were at UBS, is to build a great technology platform. And so they built it at Eaton and eventually spun it out as Eaton Solutions. And the ability to leverage that technology to scale the business in a way that I've never seen in another firm because of all the back office capabilities that not just the software provides, but also Eaton Solutions is also a service firm as well. So that was the thing that really kind of took me by surprise. And then the second piece is just how the service model works, integrating with that technology so that you can really focus on the family and the needs of the family. Um, it wasn't also a surprise to me to learn that Jack Parham was one of the pioneers in goals-based investing, and having that investment philosophy is, to me, I witnessed it back at Threshold Group. I hadn't really seen it in the industry since then, and I know how powerful that can be to change the conversation with clients and really focus them on achieving goals as opposed to getting investment returns. Um, and maybe a third thing just to throw in there, Rosemary, is for me personally, I'm a growth guy. I've always been passionate about helping firms grow and grow the right way and find families that are a good fit, and help even families find their best fit as well. So um, the fact that Eaton had not really grown at the level that maybe having a focus on growth just gave me an opportunity to say I can really make a difference here. Fortunately, the firm was excited about that, bringing that capability to the firm.
I know we're going to see amazing things from Eaton in the very near future. So I am excited to see how that unfolds. And I agree with you. In my first conversation with Jack, and he was talking about goals-based investing, and he was sort of one of the pioneers who started the goals-based investing movement. I've been hearing it in my career for probably 20 years, but to hear it from the source was really compelling, and I can imagine that was a big piece of what drew you. I would love to know. Yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and so one last thing I do want to mention because it kind of gets lost. And as I mentioned, having the technology and goals based investing, but and both of those obviously give us the ability to serve our clients really well. But everything has really been founded on planning.
Mm.
And Rob and the team that they had at US Trust and uh, basically have built, in the last 15 years at Eaton, is helping, as I said, families focus on helping them focus families on planning and being able to do the type of advanced planning work that's necessary in multi-generational families. I just don't want that to get lost in this conversation because that was another big aha moment for me as I started to really peel back the onion.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Well, I want to talk about growth. I want to talk about where we are in the industry. I feel that, and maybe you agree, maybe you don't, but really feel that the industry has seen a significant shift in the past 10 years. Um, I think that when you look at the growth patterns of some of the largest firms out there, you can see that it is an inorganic growth approach, right? Inorganic growth by way of M&A or lift outs is sort of taken over the growth scene, if you will. And I feel that organic growth has sort of taken a back seat. But there are so many advisors out there who struggle to grow, who struggle with growth. And I think that they think, well, if I'm not growing by M&A, then my growth is irrelevant because it is much more conservative than a big jump by $500 million at a time.
Yeah.
So what I would love to talk about is, your what you see as the biggest growth challenges out there today for advisors.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that organic growth has maybe taken a backseat in most firms. I think there are some firms that still, do extremely well on the organic growth side. But we only have to read any industry uh, publication or just look at news reports or on the news wires and see there's so much inorganic growth going on. It takes the headlines, right? And that's where really the stories are. But I think those firms that are having success are really, I mean, remember, we're in a relationship industry, right? And I think those firms that are having success are really leveraging their relationship capital, but but they're challenged. And part of the reason they're challenged, I think there's a couple things that happen with firms when they're starting to really focus on organic growth. One is they give up too early, right? Um, and they're impatient. And the other is they don't really have a strategy to grow. They have 10 strategies to grow. It's funny. I was just literally re-listening to a book that brought to my attention by the wonderful folks at StoryKeep, Jamie and Pete, called 10x is easier than 2x. So Dan Sullivan's kind of groundbreaking book on how to really grow your business in ways that may have seemed impossible. But the premise of 10x is easier than 2x is simply that if you just think about 2x growth and what are the ways to grow your business by 2x? And I think if we looked at our own business, we'd say, well, there's countless ways that we could grow our business, right? We could do digital marketing, we could do client referrals, we could do COI introductions, we could do events, we could do, again, countless things. We could do publications, we could do thought leadership, right? And because there's so many things, that's where people get distracted and firms get, I think, off track, is they have so many different things to focus on that they're focused on the 80% and not the 20%. And so you have to really look at what are the things, the 20% that you have to do that's going to get you 80% of the results. And so one is think bigger. And two is if you had to think way outside the box, like how would you get 10x growth? There's probably only a couple things that you would really have to focus on. So that's, again, it's a concept that I've really gravitated towards because I do think it's a reflection on our business that there's so many things that people can be doing to grow their businesses, and a lack of focus and a lack of really strategy and execution is preventing them from getting there.
I would agree with you 100% in what we do. We see a lot of advisors who come to us and they say, I tried doing this white paper series and like nobody paid attention. And I ask, well, how long did you do it for? And they're like, well, we did it for 2 months. We did papers.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you on that one. You're not going to get anywhere. Any marketing and growth strategy, I would say, to really gauge effectiveness would take a year at a minimum. Um,
At a minimum.
and longer than that, probably 12 to 18 months to see any kind of traction with any strategy. I want to go back to something you said to explore that a little bit more. When you said think bigger, what did you mean?
Yeah, well, I do think that we suffer as an industry from getting incremental growth and focusing on incremental growth. And by doing so, we're really, kind of volume is I heard this quote earlier, but, volume is the enemy of quality.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is having so many different things to quote unquote focus on. That's not focusing on anything, frankly. um, that prevents you actually from achieving those really big goals. So you got to think bigger. Like, what would be an impossible goal for us to reach next year or 3 years from now? And then how many ways could we actually achieve that goal? Well, there's probably only a couple ways to get there. So I think just thinking bigger, and a lot of firms are really scared to do that, right? It doesn't mean that that's got to be your budget goals, but at the end of the day, if you're working towards a much bigger goal, then you're going to cut out all the little stuff that you're doing that is not going to get you there. And I think that's a really interesting approach. And we can talk strategy of different ways to get there and what are some successful strategies that work. But that's kind of what I mean by thinking bigger.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with you. I think that developing a growth plan, identifying all those drivers for growth, and I think that keeps you a lot more focused than if you're sort of sprinkling across 10 or 12 different things, which I've seen often, and that just wastes money, right? It's just like a fire hose of money that is just going out the window. And just
Right.
right, so we want to be very concentrated. So I see that as well. Um, and I would like to talk about, what is successful and what's not successful. I know what we see as successful marketing strategies. We have seen some things that work very quickly, some things that do not work. I'm curious to know what you've seen as like the most successful, the most impactful growth strategies for a wealth management firm.
So we're talking organic growth, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that having a digital presence has become critical in the last 5 years. And the reason I say that, one is I've seen firms get results that way. So that speaks exactly to your question. Is I've seen firms get results. I've seen firms get outsized results. And the reason for that is, again, I've been in this business, as you mentioned, for a few decades, and the kind of relationship capital leveraging and powerful introductions will always win the day, right? We always are more successful. We're getting introduced to families by somebody that they trust or somebody that they know, whether it's through an existing client or a center of influence, an advisor they currently work with. We get introduced that way. We're always going to have a higher likelihood of success. Number one, because we can really help quickly get to fit, whether this is a good fit for them or not. Two, there are fewer hurdles to overcome because of that transferred trust. However, in the last 5 years, more and more people, more and more families are actually doing their own research.
Mm.
So where do they go for research? They're going to the web. They're going to sources like Family Office Exchange and the Ultra High Net Worth Institute, Family Wealth Alliance. They're going to different publications. They're looking at Barron's. They're looking at Forbes. They're looking at the Wall Street Journal. They're going to online sources, and they're doing their own research. So you have to be able to be findable in order for that to happen. And so I think one strategy that I've seen become more and more successful, and you and I have talked about this, is having a digital marketing strategy where you can really focus on creating valuable content that people want to digest, whether it's through video or whether it's through blogs, and driving people to that content and being quote unquote findable is going to enable you to continue to hone in on what are those customize, what are those, what's that content that they're really looking for, and you will because of that process run into opportunities. And again, I've heard stories, numerous stories from both firms and people in those firms who have had a lot of success in having a very focused digital marketing strategy that enables them to actually build a process and make that process repeatable where they're creating content that's driving people to their website, driving people to their events. And that's creating results for firms in the ultra high net worth space. I never would have, 10 years ago, I never would have thought I would be saying this, but having a digital presence and a strategy to go along with it has really produced results for a number of firms that are committed to it.
100%, and you can't get around it. And you're right, the first thing they're going to do when a family hears the company name, they're going to Google you. You better be findable or you're not real, you don't even exist.
That's right.
It is the critical piece. I'm curious for your opinion. The data speaks to this. We talk a lot about the need for a digital strategy. It's not really news, right? What do you think is the hesitancy for advisors to start some kind of content strategy?
Well, I mean, I think there are a number of things that are headwinds related to that, Rosemary. I think one is, it's a commitment and it's a long term commitment, as we said. You're not going to do it for 6 months and get results. So you have to have a long term commitment, patient capital to invest in this and you will see results. And a lot of people just don't have that patience, and they don't have patient capital. I think two is they just don't think it will work. They don't think that what they're going to create is actually going to drive results. And I think we put that one aside. And I think the third is they don't want to be in the publishing business. So they don't typically write, or if they do write, they're writing content for clients to be consumed by their clients, but they're not, they don't think of themselves as thought leaders. And I think that's where they make a mistake, because if you're a firm that really does incredible work for your clients, there are so many stories to tell about results that you've created for clients, and bringing in that expertise on subjects they really want to hear about. Not necessarily investments, maybe not even planning, but some areas where families are really struggling, what keeps them up at night. They want to hear from firms about the issues that they're struggling with. And I think if you have the ability to partner with somebody like your firm or another firm to be able to have that content creation and be able to have that expertise being communicated and put out in a very strategic way, I think you can absolutely get results.
I totally agree. So there's almost like a little bit of imposter syndrome mixed in there, right? Like
Totally.
nobody wants to hear what I'm saying. I don't have anything interesting to say. I hear that over and over again. And I just think about, these advisors have often built really successful practices doing nothing but talk to their clients. So why not make it a little bit more broad in terms of the reach, right?
Yeah, and I do think the other maybe headwind that these firms face is this is a very crowded and noisy marketplace. So they also feel like, what else do I have to offer?
Right.
So many people are talking out there. So many people are writing. So many people are doing this. Like, how are we ever going to make a difference? How is our voice even going to be heard?
Totally.
And I think that's a huge mistake, because if you're very focused and you've got a great strategy and a great partner and you're consistent in your content, you will be findable. And a firm like Eton, we're not looking, to grow by 10, 15, 20 clients a year. That's not who we are, right? We're a boutique firm that serves a few dozen incredible multi-generational families, and we want to add just a few new families a year. So we don't need a huge amount of volume for that to be successful for Eton. It's about fit. It's about finding the right families who are a good fit for us, and we're a great fit for them. And so we only need a few opportunities every year to be successful. And I think firms that may be bigger, same thing. You just scale that one or two times depending on the size of your firm. So maybe it's 5 new clients or 10 new clients. But I'm talking about firms that are truly in the ultra high net worth, the family wealth space.
hmm I agree with that. And I think also when you talk about scalability, right? So a larger firm may want to grow by larger numbers. But what I've seen over and over again in our work are the firms that do the most marketing, the most content production, the most activity. They're pumping, content out all the time because they're a larger firm. They've got more people. They have larger expectations. Are the firms who are growing faster? I've seen that over and over and over again.
Yep,
Uh,
absolutely.
years. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, we've talked about things at work. I want to know what you've seen as sort of cautionary tales, right? What are some things that you've seen advisors do that just do not work, other than be inconsistent and stop too early?
Yeah. So, I think those are two big things that I see, Rosemary. I think the third is just not having a strategy
Yeah.
and being committed to that strategy and being able to measure on a very consistent, granular basis activities that are going to get you the results that you need. So, yeah, firms give up too early. They don't have patient capital. Um, but not having a strategic plan, or having a strategic plan but not having the metrics to measure the activity that's going to drive results. And I'll just give you one simple example. If I had one strategy I knew worked, right, then I would set my goals for the next 2 or 3 years and work backwards from those goals. What are the activities that have to happen on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and even yearly basis to achieve those goals? and then break them down so that I'm now tracking them at least on a weekly basis and see where I am as far as achieving those goals. And I believe in leading indicator activities as opposed to lagging, because if our goal is to reach X number of new clients in a quarter, if we wait to the end of the quarter to kind of see how we did, it's too late,
Mm,
right?
totally.
And if we're waiting to see what kind of results we get next year, and we haven't even started to implement our strategy, it may not be too late, but again, you're behind the eight ball to get that strategy going. So when I talk about leading indicator activities, I mean week to week. Who are we in front of? How are we in front of? What does that conversation look like? What's the value that we're creating in that conversation? And how are we going to measure results from that activity? And so I think being able to have a strategy, but then more importantly, figure out what your weekly, monthly, quarterly goals are, and then measure them, and then, course correct where necessary if needed, if you start to get off track. But if you wait a month before you start to course correct, it's too late.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. Um, what marketing is testing and measuring, and testing and measuring and testing and measuring. We don't have the tools in place to measure success, whether it's on the digital side or the in real life side. You really don't know what's working, what's not working. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, the industry is changing so fast. What do you see as kind of coming down the pike, the biggest game changers, biggest curves that advisors are going to have to climb?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an hour long, 2 hour long conversation. But I'll give you maybe just a couple of headlines. I think number one, I think it's clear we're going to see more consolidation in the industry. And I think more consolidation is only going to make things more challenging for families as they try to really discern how to understand this marketplace, because it's so opaque. Everybody says they do the same thing. Everybody sounds the same. They say they provide the same services. Yet, if I'm sitting here at Eton and I'm talking to a multi generational family, and they're also talking to a big money center bank or a brokerage firm, either that family doesn't know what they're looking for, or they don't understand the differences between those firms. I'm not saying we're better by any means than the money center bank or the brokerage firm. For that family, they may be that solution may be a better fit. So why are they talking to Eaton if that's what they're really looking for, and vice versa? So if they're really looking for a bespoke, more of a white glove, more of a single family office solution, and the experience that comes along with that, then they probably shouldn't be talking to a firm like that. They should probably be talking to our peers. My point is that when you have consolidation, one, there's fewer and fewer players, but there's also more and more players coming into the marketplace that have an undefined service model. So all that does is create more confusion in the marketplace. And I think the things that made the early firms very successful when they started and now have become much bigger firms, they have cultures that are basically a conglomeration of 5, 10, 6, 8 different firms. And you can't possibly have a consistent client experience when you're combining that many firms. And I think that also presents challenges for families. So I think on the family side, I think there's going to be more and more challenges because of continued consolidation. I also think one thing that will be helpful is, and I'm also on the advisory board of the Ultra High Net Worth Institute. I was here at the very beginning when Steve and a number of people, especially Steve, who led the launch of the institute. Um, there's going to be a number of things that are really going to help both the industry practitioners like us further define the different service models and the types of advisors that are out there serving clients. And for the client side and for the family side, I think helping them understand the language and the vocabulary and getting some consistency in what things mean, what a certain type of advisor means or a certain type of services, is only going to help them be in a position to make better decisions. And I think frankly, that's best for everyone. I've always had this belief, and I think that about me, is that whenever I'm meeting with a family, my goal isn't to really win the family. My goal is to help the family make the best choice. And if that best choice is my competitor down the street or a firm halfway across the country, I want that family to be successful in what they're trying to achieve and find the solution that's going to help them get there. Sure, I'd love us to be that solution, but only if it's a great fit for what they're looking for. So I think having that attitude about our industry and really being able to create the solutions for families to help them make this distinction between this and this very opaque industry can only serve the firms and their clients better.
Yeah, I totally agree. We are in an age of transparency. So thought leadership is so important. And I think that one of the mistakes I see is that advisory firms approach content from a perspective of lead generation, right? And
Mm,
wrong place to come from, right? The place that I find the best content comes from is from a place of wanting to help families understand their choices, understand the industry, understand the nuances of the language they're going to be hearing when they're making these choices. Um,
yeah,
and when a family comes to you, you really they should know who you are, what you do, and how you approach things just by the thought leadership that you're pumping out there. And I see a lot of firms, they want leads quick and they want leads right away, and that's just not the way it's going to work right now. So I would agree with what you're saying, and I see a lot of that broadly. When we're working with firms that approach us. And the landscape is totally different than it was 10 years ago, right? And they built
no doubt.
practices in a certain way, and those ways just don't work as well anymore. So I think I would agree, in terms of like growth challenges and game changers, that's one that's not going to change as it continues to become more pronounced.
No doubt.
Well, Brian, I know we're coming up on our time. This, as always, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I love seeing you at all the events that we go to. I've loved working with you. I've loved for the more than 10 years, and I just look forward to the next 10 years. Thanks.
I do too, Rosemary. And again, I'm honored to help you launch your podcast. I know it's going to be enormously successful. You have a brilliant mind for this. You've got a great team there, and I look forward to hearing more from you and the thought leadership that you're putting out there. Because I do think that it's a game changer when you make a commitment to digital marketing and having a strategy where you're putting your own thought leadership out there in a consistent way and help you be findable. So thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Okay, look forward to it.